I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I made it. I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It was my tomb till I made it. You called my name, you called my name, and I ran out of that place, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that place, out of the darkness into your glorious day. Now your mercy has saved my soul. Now your freedom is all that I know.
Oh, the only knew Jesus when I met you. You called my name, and I ran out of that place, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that place, out of the darkness into your glorious day.
I needed rescue, my sin was heavy, but chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan, now you call me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing, now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open, 'cause when you call my name, I needed rescue. My sin was heavy, my chains break at the weight of your glory.
I needed shelter, I was an orphan, now you call me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing, now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open, 'cause when you call my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You call my name, and I ran out of that place, out of the darkness into your glorious day. There is a river where goodness flows. There is a fountain that drowns sorrow. There is an ocean deeper than fear. The tide is rising, rising. Deep inside it's overflowing. The heart of God, the blood of heaven.
crashing over us, the tide is rising.
Bursting up from We come alive in the river. We come alive in the river. We come alive in the river. Y'all sing this with me again. Oh, there is a river where goodness flows. There is a fountain that drowns sorrow. There is an ocean deeper than fear. The tide is rising, rising. There is a current stirring deep inside. It's overflowing from this heart of God. The flood of heaven crashing over us. The tide is rising, rising. Bursting, bursting up from the ground. We feel it now. Bursting, bursting up from the ground. We feel it now. We come alive in the river. 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 Set all the captives free. Spring up a well, spring up a well, spring up a well in me. Nothing can stop this joy. We're dancing in the streets. Spring up a well, spring up a well, spring up a well in me. We come alive in the river. 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 Spring up a well. Spring up a well. Spring up a well. Spring up a well in me. Spring up a well. Spring up a well. Spring up a well. Spring up a well. Spring up a well in me.
Y'all can be seated.
Awesome. How's everybody this morning? You all look good, I think. Y'all look alive. Good. Hope you had your coffee. Awesome. We are thrilled to be here this morning. Hey, this is the worship ensemble class that meets on Monday nights. How about that? Not bad, right? Good job, guys. We are thrilled to have with us this morning one of our very own from right here in Campbellsville, Kentucky. She's gone out into the world and done some amazing things. Former Miss Kentucky, went and competed in the Miss America pageant contest. I always wonder what they call that these days. Pageant. We'll go with that. So now you can see her on LEX 18, giving us all the news we need. We consider her a superstar around here, primarily because she has a road named after her. Isn't that awesome? So there's hope. When you get out of Campbellsville University and you go out and do great things, we're going to name a road after you. Just kidding. We're thrilled to have with us one of our very own, Nancy Cox. Please come. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. It's my pleasure to be here, to share, to speak to friends, old friends and new friends and future friends, I hope. It's always good to get out from behind that anchor desk and look into the faces of the people I share with every night. It's especially wonderful to speak here at Campbellsville University, where, as my daughter says, back in the 1900s, I started my college career, and it was Campbellsville College at that time. That's Doug Wingler and me. We were on the front of, back then we had these brochures you actually had to put in the mail. They weren't links to websites, and Campbellsville was gracious enough in our freshman year to put us on the cover. So it was a good time here, no question. I was only here for 2 years, but in that time, I got a great foundation here. Involved in some things, that was freshman attendant in the homecoming court, the hair and the dress. You can tell it's the 1900s, no question. But when I was here, I was fortunate to be in the class of Russ Mobley, who is a legend here. I'm sure if you haven't heard of him, ask about him. He had a big influence on me. He was a big personality, a big presence on stage, and that kind of helped me break out of my shell to try to be the person I wanted to be when I was up on stage. Because it's kind of strange. To do what I do, I'm a shy person, believe it or not. And that's why right now I'm literally shaking, because this is home. This is home, and even though I've spoken at a lot of different places, it's different when you come home, and this is where you started, and the people here know you aren't that special, maybe, I guess, or they saw you in the very formative, ugly years, I would say. But the main reason I like getting out and getting into the public and speaking at an event like this is because for 30 years, almost, and I'm thinking I counted up something like 18,000 newscasts, I have brought people the bad news, the worst things going on in the world, the injustices, the crime, the sadness, every night, every newscast. I come into your home and I tell you about all that. So to be here on this stage, it's so nice to get to share the good news and my good news. You know, when I get out and speak to folks, I get some really weird questions. Very few of them are about news. They're usually about what makeup I wear, or where I'm getting my nails done, where I get my clothes. Do you know where I can find that same necklace you're wearing? That kind of thing. I've even been asked, who's your plastic surgeon? Well, once I find one, hopefully he would do a better job than this. But yeah, people are not shy about what they want to ask you. But the question I've gotten throughout the years is, how do you do it? How do you talk about such bad stuff night after night? And early on in my career, I didn't really think about it. It was compartmentalized, what I did at work, what I had to present, and then the rest of my life. But as you age and get some experience and get out in the field more and more, and you speak to these people who are the subject of your stories, it is a little heavy to take home with you every night. Look at, in the past few weeks, what I've had to talk about, what you've had to read and listen to. The invasion of Ukraine, inflation, COVID, earthquakes, mudslides, wildfires, flooding, animal abuse, which I've never seen so much before, and the opioid epidemic, which has touched, if not every family, certainly every community. It can be depressing. I'm not going to tell you it's not. And sometimes I don't realize it. But there are evenings when my daughter says, "Mom, are you feeling a little irritable?" And that's her way of saying, you're being a pain, snap out of it. And I don't even realize I'm doing that. But when you're constantly talking about the bad things we do to each other, it does have an effect. But you know, I've learned over the years a different way of looking at it. When I go home at night and I close my eyes, I may be thinking about the events of the day, but I'm not seeing the face of Vladimir Putin or Joe Biden or Donald Trump or the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. I don't see those faces. But I do see some other faces. This is 7-year-old Gabby Doolin. She vanished from her brother's youth football game just in a matter of minutes. She was playing with some other little kids, and all of a sudden her parents saw those other children, but Gabby wasn't around. She had slipped off. She'd been lured off. And just in a matter of about 30 minutes, she was abused and she was murdered and left in a creek not a half mile from that football field. So yeah, I see that face a lot. I also see this face, 10-year-old Wesley Mullins in Georgetown, Kentucky. He was staying with his grandfather, and a friend of that grandfather, same scenario. He was taken, he was abused, and he was left dead. This was one of the first faces I ever saw in news that I took home with me. That's 9-year-old Scotty Baker. And about 28 years ago in eastern Kentucky, his stepmother and a friend picked him up from school. And that was the last anyone saw of him for days and weeks. He was finally found on Thanksgiving Day at the top of a mountain where he had been strangled and set on fire because his stepmother was pregnant and she was jealous of Scotty and the attention he would get from her new husband. Then there's 10-year-old Michaela Watkins. Teachers had filed complaints thinking that she was being abused. The marks on her, her weight loss, she was very, very small for her age. So her father and stepmother, tired of the complaints, took her out of school and homeschooled her. Many months went by and no one ever saw Michaela anymore. Neighbors didn't see her. I'm not going to go into detail, but you know where that's going. Abused and killed at home. Can't even begin to go into the countless stories of children, talking babies, abused in their home, killed in their homes. That's a lot to deal with. That's much more troubling to me than picturing the face of Vladimir Putin. And you probably know a lot of stories like this that never make the news. Stories in your hometown, stories in this town, maybe, unfortunately, stories in your family. It's a lot. Because unfortunately, evil's everywhere. Sadness is everywhere. I'm just continually horrified at the things we do to each other. Because these faces I showed you, these were not people attacked by a street gang. These weren't people victimized by a government or by a criminal. These were people victimized by people who live on our own street, live in our own homes, people we consider family and friends. So for me, that's not easy to leave at work. I do get sad. But I've learned to look for a bigger story. I've learned, even as we're reporting these stories, to go beyond and look for a different story, a bigger story. Mr. Rogers put it best when he said his mother always told him to look for the helpers. Well, when I look for the helpers, I see faces like this. That's Brian Jared. We reported on him when a plane crashed in Lexington, killing 49 of the 50 people on board. He was the first there. And Brian quickly realized the destruction and the loss of life. The plane was on fire, but he heard somebody moaning. Odds of a survivor from what he was seeing were not good. But he still stepped in to that disaster, and he pulled out one person, and that person survived. I don't know that I could have done that, but Brian did it without thinking. You know what? He's an average guy. We've become friends over the years because of our work. He's just a normal, goofy guy, to be quite honest, who likes running and playing with his dogs. But in that one moment, he was everything to that one person who survived. I think of this memorial set up for Wesley Mullins. That was done by the police officers in Georgetown who diligently worked his case and tried to find him and then put his killer away. They made this memorial, but they also raised funds and started a community resource center for kids like Wesley, to give them a safe place to go, to give them people around them who they could speak to if they were hurting, if they were being abused. We've seen and heard about a lot of this kind of person in the stories we're hearing from Ukraine. Every day, heroic efforts that we either see in video or we hear about. Stories of pulling people from the rubble, literally. Stories of people who are taking in refugees, giving up their own resources, their time, maybe even their homes, to get these people to safety. These are people who, as I said, are everyday people, but they're willing to step in. They're willing to step in front of the innocent, to step up when needed, and to step between people and their pain. I met a lot of these people 4 years ago when I went through the most physically challenging experience of my life. You may have seen a picture similar to this, a beauty queen, the perfect crown, the perfect hair, the perfect teeth, and all that stuff. But you don't really see the person inside. From a picture, you can't see their problems, their issues. We've heard a lot of people use the phrase, everybody has something. Everybody does have something. And when you look at a picture of a Miss Kentucky or an athlete or a pastor, you are not seeing inside. I'd always been pretty ambitious, pretty determined, very involved, very competitive, to a point it kind of drove my family a little crazy. It started when I won a speech contest at 9 years old over here at Campbellsville Baptist Church. And then I was so fortunate, again, back in the 1900s, to be crowned Miss Kentucky. Nobody knows how hard I had to work for that. You only see a picture. Same thing with television. You only see a news anchor or a sports reporter. You don't see the effort it took to get there, or even the nerves and fears that person has before going on air. We don't know from pictures what people look like inside. But x-rays do show us what people look like inside. First of all, this was me 4 years ago, and even in that picture, in a hospital gown that opened in the back, of course, and was drafty and all that, I had my game face on, right? And when you're competitive and you try to achieve, you learn to flip that game face on, just like in the previous picture. So yeah, you don't see what I was going through, even in that really ugly picture right there. A lot of you've been here, or you will be here, or your parents have been here, and you've sat beside them, wearing an ugly hospital gown, no shoes, No jewelry, no makeup, no cell phone, just alone in the very back room of a cold, massive hospital. Just tile and bright lights first thing in the morning. They will you away from the loved ones who brought you there, who have their game faces on, trying to make you feel better. But they can't go with you. It's just you with almost nothing of your own. You don't see that from a picture. You can't see what's inside of a person from a picture. But as I said, with an X-ray, you can. This was me on April 10th, 2018, very early in the morning. That was the spine I'd been walking around with for many years. I'd learned to adjust, I'd learned to hide it, I learned to stand a certain way. I learned to tailor my clothes so you wouldn't see my deformity. And nobody really knew the pain I was in because I had that game face on 99% of the time. Even my family really didn't understand that this wasn't a choice for me. This was a necessity to have this corrected. When my doctor measured this curve the day before surgery, and it was about, at its worst, about 42 degrees of a curve, and he was explaining why this had to be done. And he mentioned the word that I'd never heard in any of our conversations before: wheelchair. Wheelchair was my future if I didn't correct this. For months, that pain had grown daily. Simple things like doing the laundry, walking the dog, loading a dishwasher, and standing on a cement floor anchoring a newscast were quickly becoming impossible. I remember very vividly looking for a stool that was just the right height so that when I cooked in my kitchen, I could sit down while I did it. I tried to keep the game face on, and I tried to make that all work. But when the word wheelchair was laid out there, I knew I had no choice. So this is what my spine looks like now. I think it looks pretty good. A lot of people see that and sort of gasp, and I get that. The white lines and the circles you see, that's titanium rods and screws. And that's holding me together. And it's all anchored into my hips with those large screws you see there. You can't go through something like that. You can't drill into that much of your spine, that much of your bone, and not be in excruciating pain. So to fix my pain, I had to have more pain. I missed almost 6 months of work. I was on multiple types of painkillers every day. It took one on top of the other to work together to just keep me from being in tears all day long. It was tough to get through a day, I will admit to you that. But obviously I did endure it, and I'm here, and I'm standing upright. I don't need a chair to speak to you like I used to. By God's grace, I'm virtually pain-free. For me, a 3 is pain-free, and I thank God for that every day. It's nothing short of a miracle to me. And God used people, everyday people, to give me that miracle. People stepped in for me. My surgeons, Dr. Vasquez, who's now head of neurosurgery at the University of Miami, Dr. Cassidy, Dr. Tibbs, nurses, working on my surgery for 6 hours. There were physical therapists and occupational therapists who refused to let me lie there and try to let the pain go away. Nope, they got me on my feet. They made me get dressed, and they led me back to my life. People I didn't know stepped in. When I was laying in a bed very early in the morning before sunrise at Cardinal Hill Hospital in Lexington, I'd always wake up before it was time to have more pain medicine, and I watched that clock tick. But then every morning, about 4:30, I heard the squeaky wheels of a coffee cart coming down the hallway. And if you follow me on any social media, you know coffee is my spirit animal. And I would hear that coming down the hall. And the lady with the coffee cart always knew I woke up early and I needed coffee before even breakfast. So she'd get going a little early and she'd bring me that coffee in at 4:30. I also knew that one of my managers at WLEX was always awake by then. So I'd give her till about 5 o'clock and I'd text her and she'd send me a joke. She'd make me laugh or say something totally outrageous, like giving me an assignment to go horseback riding for my next feature. And there was the housekeeper who really never spoke to me. She was a tiny little lady who came in and she never stopped moving. She was mopping or sweeping or wiping, and she never stopped singing. Usually an old hymn that I'd been familiar with for many years. Never stopped to say, "Let me minister to you." But she just did it by being there. I knew she was going to be there, and I knew she'd sing a song I'd like. And then there was the chaplain who was in charge of recreation for the folks at Cardinal Hill. Bless his heart. He came in every night and asked me to go down and play cards. Well, I was about 20 years younger than everybody else in that hospital. And getting myself up at that time of day and walking down the hall to play cards was not what I wanted to do. And he asked me every night anyway. And that showed me he was there. He was willing to step in. These people stepped up and they stood between me and my pain and my fear and my isolation and my despair. They stood there when I didn't realize all those feelings were temporary. They were overwhelming and they were real for me. They stepped between them. And you know, each of us in here, I want you to see this contrast. Each of us in here is going to be in one of those positions at some point, probably both at some point. You're either going to be that person in that dark place who can't see that pain as temporary, or physical pain, or personal tragedy, or family loss. Or you're going to be that person who maybe can step in and make a difference. Something small, like a cup of coffee, just singing a song, or asking someone to play cards. We're going to be in one of those positions. I want to read to you an excerpt from one of my favorite authors. It's Max Lucado, who wrote Bold Love. This was a book of examples of bold love. It's chapter 2, and it's a portion of it. It's called A Satisfied Thirst. "Mommy, I'm so thirsty. I need a drink." Susanna heard her daughter's pleas, but there was nothing she could do. She and 4-year-old Gaini were trapped beneath tons of collapsed concrete and steel. Beside them in the darkness lay the body of Susanna's sister-in-law, Karine, one of the 55,000 victims of the worst earthquake in the history of Soviet Armenia. Susanna had gone to Karine's house to try on a dress. It was December 7th, 1988 at 11:30 a.m. The quake hit at 11:41. She had just removed the dress, so she was clad in only stockings and a slip when the 5th-floor apartment began to shake. Susanna grabbed her daughter, but had taken only a few steps before the floor collapsed, and they tumbled in. Susanna, Gaini, and Karine fell into the basement with the 9-story apartment house crumbling around them. "Mommy, I need a drink. Please give me something." There was nothing for Susanna to give. She was trapped flat on her back, a concrete panel just 18 inches above her head, and a crumpled water pipe above her shoulders kept her from standing. Feeling around in the darkness, she found a 24-ounce jar of blackberry jam that had fallen into the basement. She gave the entire jar to her daughter to eat, little by little, but it was gone by the second day. "Mommy, I'm so thirsty." Susanna knew she would die, but she wanted her daughter to live. She found a dress, perhaps the one she had tried on, and made a bed for Gayane. Though it was bitter cold, she took off her stockings and wrapped them around her child to keep her warm. The two were trapped for 8 days. Because of darkness, Susanna lost track of time. Because of the cold, she lost feeling in her fingers and toes. And because of her inability to move, she lost hope. She was just waiting for death. She began to hallucinate. Her thoughts wandered. A merciful sleep occasionally freed her from the horror of her entombment, but sleep would be brief. Something always awakened her, the cold or the hunger, or most often the voice of her daughter. "Mommy, I'm thirsty." At some point in that eternal night, Susanna had an idea. She remembered a television program about an explorer in the Arctic who was dying of thirst. His comrade slashed open his hand and gave his friend his blood. "Susanna, I had no water, no fruit juice, no liquids. It was then I remembered my own blood." Her groping finger, numb from the cold, found a piece of shattered glass. She sliced open her left index finger and gave it to her daughter to suck. Susanna had no idea how many times she cut herself. She only knows that if she hadn't, Gayane would have died. That mother, Susanna, stepped between her daughter's life and death, between her daughter's pain and her own. In our nation right now, in our world, the thirst is great. In our state, in our community, maybe in our own hearts. Each of us is on one side of that thirst. Maybe we need someone else to give us a part of them. Or maybe we need to offer a part of ourselves to someone else. I think a lot about that thirst every day in the stories I report. In the murders, the rape, the addiction, the death. It's not just a bad part of town. It's not just in the big city. It's everywhere. It's all around us. And I often feel helpless, often like Susanna, groping in the darkness for a way to help. I can't pull people from airplanes, but I can tell the story of the man who did. I can't physically go to Ukraine or Poland and help the refugees. I can't physically fight for them, but I can tell the story of the people who do. Friday, I spoke by Facebook Live with a man named Oleg in Kiev, in Ukraine. He'd been a pastor for 20 plus years, and now he was a soldier. He was training 80 men between the ages of 17 and 70, and he was going to lead them into battle. He talked to me about sending his family away to Poland, and he talked to me how in 48 hours he was taking those men, some who had never even held a gun before, to the very front lines. I heard from Oleg day before yesterday, and at that point he was still safe. I can't help him, but I can tell his story. And maybe one person might be moved to offer aid, to send money to help the people of Poland take care of the refugees, making their voices heard in the political arena, or simply by praying. We can affect our own little corner of the world. Our people, maybe the ones right beside us right now who are being invaded, whether it's by depression, harmful thoughts, mental illness, physical illness, we can look around us for the refugee, for the brokenhearted, for the person in pain, or the one like Susanna, who is trying to quench the thirst of just one person near her. we can step in. Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you that even in times of great trouble, you are there. And it's not by our own power that we step in, but by yours. Help us remember that, like Paul and Silas in prison, when there appears to be no hope, when we don't know what to pray for, we can simply thank you. I thank you here today, Father, to be here, to be in this place, and to be with these people, many of whom stepped in for me. Bless everyone here, Lord, and speak to our hearts that we would follow your will. In Jesus' name, amen.
If you guys give her a hand, thank you so much. What a powerful word, Nancy. I wanted you to consider how will you step in today. It doesn't have to be down the road. It can be right now when you leave this place. And what an encouragement it is that there is a God that stepped in with his own blood to save us and to rescue us. And so thank you so much. Really, really touching. And I appreciate you being here. Just a few announcements before you leave. I'm the announcement guy at church, and so I'm a professional at this, so just bear with me for a few seconds. Just a couple of things I want to make you aware of. One, you need to scan the QR code that'll be up here so you can get credit for this wonderful day of convocation. But also, there are some opportunities as you leave in the foyer. We are looking for student leaders to help us with Campus Ministry Council. You can apply for that on the CU app. You can also apply for a summer ministry opportunity called CU Crew. That's on the app as well. And this weekend in Ransdale Chapel, Reverend Montel Richardson with First Baptist is going to be coming on campus to provide some great opportunities of ministry. Saturday night, there's going to be a Christian comedian here. On Sunday, he's going to bring worship for us at 11 a.m. in the chapel, and then there'll be food to follow. And so that's March 19th and 20th this weekend. I hope that you check that out. And also, as you head out this morning, you might have noticed this coming in, but Dave Razor from English Language Institute China has a table in the foyer to talk about ways that you could serve and be connected with that. I encourage you. I had a friend who served through them a few years ago and some really great opportunities through ESL. And so check that out as you head out this morning. I hope you have a blessed day, but really somebody, before you leave, in your brain and in your heart, I hope you do take a second. Think about a name, one name of somebody who stepped in for you. And then try to think of a name as you leave out of somebody that God is putting on your heart to step in for as you go throughout this day. Hope you have a blessed day, and you are dismissed.